Simon Says subscribe and click on the bell icon to receive notifications.
In this section of the course, we're going to move on to taking a look at a very important set of functions, and those are lookup functions. Consistently voted the most popular and most used functions in Excel, VLOOKUPs help us look up information in a table based on a corresponding value. And in this lesson, we're going to start out by taking a look at VLOOKUP. Now, VLOOKUP is one of the oldest lookup functions. It's a much loved function, but it does have its limitations. And those limitations have been dealt with recently with the release of a new lookup formula called XLOOKUP. And we're going to be taking a look at XLOOKUP a bit later on in this section. So let's start out by taking a look at VLOOKUP, because this is still a really popular function and you're going to need to know how it works, because you're going to find that so many spreadsheets, particularly older spreadsheets, will probably contain this formula at some point. Now, the first thing to remember about VLOOKUP is that it has two different incarnations. We have VLOOKUP exact match and we also have VLOOKUP approximate match. So let's deal with exact match first of all, because this is the one you're more likely to come across. Now, what we have in this first spreadsheet is we have a small list of part numbers. And notice that in columns B and C, where we have the description and the unit price, we don't have any values in there. Now, we have another spreadsheet at the bottom called Parts Catalog. And this is a master list of all of the parts. So maybe we are a supplier of different parts. We have all of the parts listed in the first column, then we have the description, and then we have the price for each part. So effectively what we want to do is we want to look up the part number in the parts catalog in this first column, and we want it to return the description and the price. So this is where we can use VLOOKUP. Now, I would recommend that when you're using VLOOKUP, that you do put your data into a table. So I'm going to go back to my parts catalog. I'm going to click and I'm going to press Control T. Yes, my table has headers. Let's click on OK. And once again, I'm just going to remove the table style. And I'm going to give my table a name. We're going to call it Parts Catalog. Remember, with these table names, you can't have any spaces. So let's go back. Let's type in equals VLOOKUP. Now, if you're wondering what the V part of VLOOKUP stands for, it's vertical, because we also have an HLOOKUP we can use, which stands for horizontal lookup. And again, we'll look at that in another lesson. Now, VLOOKUP has 3 mandatory arguments and 1 optional at the end. The first argument is the lookup value. So this is, what do we want to look up in the table? Well, I want to look up the part number, so what we have in cell A5. Table array, where do I want to look this up? I want to look up the part number in the parts catalog table. Now, because we've put this in a table, I can simply start to type in the name of the table and it's going to come up underneath. So this is one of the reasons why I like to put the data in a table. If we hadn't have done that, we would need to jump across to the parts catalog worksheet and start selecting the cell range. And that can be a little bit awkward. So it's much easier just to name the table and then you can pick it up from the original worksheet. Comma. Column index number. Which column do we want to return? Now, we want to return the description, and the description column in the parts catalog is column number 2. VLOOKUP numbers columns from left to right. So the column index number is 2, comma, and this is where we get to specify if we're doing an approximate or an exact match. Now, we want to exactly match the part number in the table. So we want a false on the end here. Now, remember, with trues and falses, you can replace these with 0 for false or 1 for true. I'm going to leave it on false. Let's close the bracket, hit enter, and you can see that it's returned that description. Now I'm going to double click to widen out this column, and then we can simply drag this formula down. Now notice here that we have an NA error, and we spoke about these in a previous lesson. Now, why are we getting this error? Well, I'm going to guess that this part number doesn't exist in the parts catalog. So if we jump back to the parts catalog, I'm going to do a quick search in this column for part number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's press Control F, What am I looking for? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the part number. Let's say find next. It can't find what I'm looking for. So I can safely assume that somebody's typed this part number in wrong. Now I could choose to delete that row, or I could just use error handling to deal with this. Now it is an NA error, so I can use if NA. I could also use if error if I wanted to. And if it can't find the part number, I just want it to say part not found. We'll add that onto the end, hit enter, and now when we double click to copy this down, that now makes more sense. Let's do another VLOOKUP for the unit price. Now this time we're looking up the information in column number 3. So part number is column 1, description's column 2, price is column 3. So this is basically virtually identical to what we just did. We're just changing the column number that we're returning. So our lookup value is the part number, our table array is the parts catalog table. The column index number this time is 3, and we're doing an exact match. We can have false on the end there or simply a 0. Close the bracket, control enter, and then when we double clickety click to copy this down, it's going to return the correct results. Again, we have NA in there, so we'll want to add in some error handling. So let's use if error this time because we haven't used that yet. So I'm going to add if error in there, and this time it's going to say price not found. Close the bracket, hit enter, and double clickety click to copy that down. So that is a very simple VLOOKUP exact match. Let's take a look at a different situation. I'm going to jump across to this other worksheet that I have here, and we're going to use the approximate match argument. Now, approximate match is when you're looking up something that doesn't exactly exist in the table that you're looking it up in. So for example, you can see here that we have some tax brackets. We have a low end value, a high end value, and then a marginal tax rate. And what I want to do is I want to look up somebody's annual salary in this table, and I want it to return the marginal tax rate. But if you take a look at this first salary of 55,000, if I take a look at these values in my table, you can see that I don't exactly have 55,000 written out in a cell. 55,000 is going to fall somewhere in this bracket just here. So we can't do an exact match because it doesn't exist exactly in the table that we're looking it up in. This is where we need to use an approximate match. Now, this time I'm not going to convert these to tables because they're small data sets on the same worksheet. So let's go straight in with our VLOOKUP. Now, our lookup value is the salary. Our table array, well, we're looking it up in this table over here. Now, because I want to drag this formula down, I need to press F4 to lock those cell references in place. The column index number, well, I'm returning the marginal tax rate, which is column number 3. And this time we're doing an approximate match, so I need a true on the end there. Close the bracket, control enter, and then we can copy this formula down, and we should find that these values are correct. So let's just do a spot check. Annual salary 55,000, that's going to fall within this range. The marginal tax rate is 25%. If we take a look at 90,000, that's going to fall within this range, and the marginal tax rate returned is 28%. So that is how you construct a VLOOKUP and the difference between VLOOKUP approximate match and VLOOKUP exact match. In the previous lesson, we saw how we can do a VLOOKUP, and I mentioned that the V part of VLOOKUP stands for vertical. Now we have another lookup function called HLOOKUP, and as you might imagine, the H stands for horizontal. So the difference between HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP is that you use one if your data is organized vertically, and the other if your data is organized horizontally. Now, the format that most data is in is vertical. For example, this data set that you can see on this worksheet, this is vertical data. It's where we have our column headings running across the top here, and then we have our rows or our records. And this is by far the most common. But occasionally you will come across a spreadsheet where the data is organized horizontally. So let me show you what that looks like. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this data set and I'm going to flip it around the other way. So this is also a good opportunity for you to see how to transpose data, which effectively will change the layout. So I'm going to click in my data, Control A to select everything. I'm going to press Control C to copy. I'm just going to go underneath this table, click in a cell, and then I'm going to transpose this data. Now, if we go up to the lower half of the paste button and open up Paste Special, this is where we have our transpose feature. Now, if I click on this and click on OK, it's going to flip that data the other way around. So now you'll notice that we have the column headings in the rows as opposed to in the columns. So we have our titles of our movies running across the row, the year running across the row, so on and so forth. Now, if I wanted to perform a lookup using data that was organized like this, I would need to use HLOOKUP. Because when we use a VLOOKUP, the third argument is the column reference number. So it's asking us to specify the column that we want to return. Now, with HLOOKUP, we need to specify the row that we want to return as opposed to the column. So let's take a look at what that would look like. I'm going to jump across to the HLOOKUP worksheet. And what I want to be able to do here is select a movie from the drop-down list and have it return the year, what it's rated, and the genre. So we're going to start out by creating a data validation drop-down. So let's go to data, click the drop-down next to data validation and choose data validation from the menu. We want to create a list, and my source for the list I'm going to find on the movie database worksheet, and I'm going to choose the titles of all of the movies. Click on OK. So now I should find that I have a drop-down list that contains all of those movie names, and I can use this to select whichever movie I'm interested in looking at. So now I want to construct an HLOOKUP formula. So let's type in HLOOKUP. And what you'll notice is that the arguments are pretty much exactly the same as when we're using VLOOKUP, except the third argument here is row index number as opposed to col index number. So our lookup value is going to be the film that we select in cell B5, comma, the table array. Now, I haven't named my table. So what I would need to do here is jump across to Movie Database, go down to here and select the entire table. Now, of course, I can do that, but it's quite a long table, so I'm going to come out of here. Instead of creating a table, I'm going to turn this into a range. So let's click Control A. I'm going to go up to the name box just here, and I'm going to give this range of cells a name. And we're going to call this movies and hit enter, because you can use named ranges in lookup formulas as well. So let's go back to our HLOOKUP. Our lookup value is the movie name. The table array, well, I want to use the range that I just created. Now I could start to type in the name of the range. You can see there it is, movies. Alternatively, if you can't remember what you called it, you can press the F3 key and it will show you any named ranges you have in your workbook. So I'm going to select movies. Let's click on OK. Row index number. What row do I want to return? Well, I want to return the year. I can't remember which row that is. Let's quickly jump back across and have a look. So the year is row 2. Let's go back to our formula. Now I'm going to get rid of that HLOOKUP. And we're going to say we want to return the second row, and then we can do an exact or an approximate match. Now I want to exactly match the film name in that range of cells, so we want a false on the end here or 0. Let's hit return, and you can see it's returned the year 2016. And if we change the movie name, so let's do something at the top here, La La Land, again that's 2016. Let's check it in the movie database, La La Land, and the year is 2016. Now, with these formulas, you can't necessarily copy these down. You're going to get some NA errors. Because if we take a look at this formula, we can see that it's looking up cell B6, which is currently blank, in the movies table, and it's trying to return row 2 again. So this isn't correct. So if we escape out of there, I could make this a little bit better by locking the cell reference B5 in the formula so it doesn't move. So let's do that. Let's press F4. Hit enter. Now it's still not going to work properly because it's returning row number 2 every single time. But I could simply go in, edit these formulas and change the row. So we're looking for rated and genre. So rated is row 3 and genre is row 6. So I'm very quickly just going to come into this formula. We'll update this row number to 3. and we'll update this row number to 6. So now when I change this to something else, we get all of the results that we're looking for. So that's the difference between VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. It really does just relate to the way you have your data organized on your page. So far in this section, we've been taking a look at how we can use VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP to look up information in a table. And I did mention in the very first lesson that VLOOKUP, whilst popular, does have its limitations. And that's exactly what we're going to cover in this lesson. We're going to explore the limitations of VLOOKUP, and I'm going to show you how you can combine two formulas together to perform a more flexible lookup. Now, once again, we're starting with some very basic data. I have some categories, I have some apps that belong to those categories, and we have the amount of revenue that this app has generated and also the profit. So these might be mobile apps. And what I want to do is I want to be able to select an app from the list over here and have it return the category, the profit, and the revenue. So let's set up our data validation drop-down list first of all. I'm going to go to the Data tab, click the drop-down Data Validation. We want a list just here, and the source for our list, well, we want all of the apps. So let's select this range and click on OK, and now we can choose which app we're interested in from the menu. Now, let's first try and do this lookup using VLOOKUP, because that's really going to highlight to you the limitations. So let's type in equals VLOOKUP. Our lookup value, well, we're looking up the app in cell H5. I'm going to press F4 to lock that in place, comma, table array. Where are we looking up this app? Well, we're looking it up in this table over here. Again, I'm going to press F4 to lock that in place, comma, column index number. Now I want to return the category, and the category is in column number 1. So let's type in 1. Am I doing exact or approximate matching? Well, I want to exactly match the application name in the table, so we're doing an exact match. We want a false or a 0 on the end just here. Now let's hit enter. I'm getting an NA error. So why is that? Well, this is related to this argument here, the column index number. When you're using VLOOKUP, it can only return values that are to the right of the lookup value. So my lookup value in this case is bejeweled, and bejeweled is effectively in the second column. So if I wanted to return the revenue or the profit, that would work absolutely fine because these two columns are to the right of where the lookup value exists. But because in this case I want to return the category, which is to the left of it, it can't do it. And that is the limitation of VLOOKUP. You can't have a lookup value in the table and return values that are to the left. Everything always has to be to the right. So VLOOKUP tends to work best when your lookup value is in the first column of your table. Now, because of this limitation, we need to explore an alternative method when it comes to performing more flexible lookups. And to do this, we can combine two functions in Excel, index and match. So let's first take a look at what these two functions do individually, and then I'll show you why they're so powerful when you combine them together. So let's start out with index. If we type in equals index, notice here that we have a few different arguments. Now there are two different versions of index. We're using the top one just here. Now my array, the way that I remember this is the array is always the range of cells where you're going to find your answer. Now we're looking for the category, so I'm going to select the category array, comma. Now the next argument is the row number. I need to tell it the row number to return. So if I'm looking up bejeweled, I can see that that is 1, 2, 3. That's the fourth one in the list. So I want it to return row number 4. Close the bracket, hit enter, and it returns the correct category for the app bejeweled. But this is a very manual process. I don't want to be counting down rows in order to get my answer. I have a very small data set here, so it's not too much of a problem. But imagine if you had a data set with thousands or hundreds of thousands of rows. That's just not going to be plausible. So with that in mind, let's take a look at what the match function does on its own. So if we type in match, This function has 3 arguments. The first one is lookup value. So we're looking up the app. The next argument is lookup array. So where are we going to find this app? Well, we're going to find it in the app array, and then we need to specify the match type that we're doing. Now, I want to exactly match the app name in the selected range, so I'm going to put 0 in here, close the bracket, hit enter. Check out what it returns. It returns the row number. So we can basically combine this match with index to automate our lookup. So let's go from the top. We're going to type in index. Our array is where we're going to find our answer, which is this category array. When we get to the row number argument, we're going to go straight into our match. Our lookup value is Bejeweled. I'm going to press F4 to lock that in place. Where are we going to find that? Well, we're going to find it in the apps list. And then I'm doing an exact match. And I think I'm going to lock these cell references as well. So let's just go back and press F4 to lock all of these because we don't really want anything to move around. Close the bracket for match and close the bracket for index. Hit enter. We get the result that we're looking for. Let's do it again, but this time we're going to find the profit. So we're going to type in index. Array is where our answer is going to be. So this time we want to select the profit array. Let's press F4. We go straight into our match. Our lookup value is Bejeweled. Where are we going to find it? We're going to find it in our apps list. And we want to do an exact match. Close off match, close off index, hit enter, and we get our answer. And I'm just going to apply some accounting format. Let's do the final one. Hopefully you're getting the idea here. Index. Where is our answer? Well, this time we're going to find it in the revenue array. F4 to lock. Straight into match. We're looking up Bejeweled. We're looking it up in the apps list. And we're doing an exact match. Close off match, close off index, hit enter, and we get the correct result. So if we take a look at this row for Bejeweled, I can see that it's in the game category. The revenue is 18,750 and the profit is 984.90. And if I change this to something else, we should find that everything updates perfectly. So now we're looking at the record for OneDrive. So index and match combined together are a much more flexible way of doing lookups because it doesn't matter where your lookup value exists in relation to the columns that you want to return. So bear this in mind if you're trying to use VLOOKUP and having problems. It might be that you just need to switch to index and match. So far in this section, we've seen how we can perform lookups using VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, and by combining the index and match functions. And it's now time to move on to talking about the most modern of lookups, and that is XLOOKUP. XLOOKUP was introduced in Excel 2019, and the whole concept behind XLOOKUP is to really provide an easier way of doing essentially the index and match formula. Because one thing you need to understand is that index and match wasn't invented to do lookups. They were two separate functions that people ended up mashing together in order to get around the limitations of VLOOKUP. So the index and match combination for doing lookups was really a workaround or a hack, if you like. So Microsoft finally did deal with this by introducing XLOOKUP, which makes the whole process of flexible lookups a lot easier. We don't have any of the limitations that we have with VLOOKUP, and it's a lot easier to construct and remember than index and match. And we're also going to take a quick look at XMATCH, which came along with XLOOKUP. So let's start out by using XLOOKUP to do a very similar lookup. Again, we have our categories, our apps, our revenue, and our profit. Now, I've already gone in and created the data validation dropdown. You've seen me do this quite a few times already in this course. I didn't think I needed to waste time and show you that again. Now, we're going to do the same thing. We want to return the category based on the app that's been selected. So let's use XLOOKUP. Now, one of the other advantages of XLOOKUP is that we now have more arguments to give us even more flexibility. Now notice that the final three arguments, those are all optional because they're contained within square brackets. So let's just do a very basic XLOOKUP first of all, and then we'll explore some of the other options. And I think you'll find this so much easier than index and match. Now the first argument here is lookup value. What are we looking up? Well, we're looking up whatever we have in cell H5, F4 to lock, comma. Where are we looking it up? What is the lookup array? Well, we're looking up Google Docs in the apps list, F4 to lock, comma. What do we want to return? We want to return the category. So we just simply need to select the category array. That is literally it. So much easier than remembering that index and match formula. Let's hit enter. It returns productivity. Now again, this isn't a formula that we can copy down. If we copy this down, we're just going to get productivity again, but it is fairly straightforward just to edit this formula. Because H5, that's going to be the same. The cell range B6 to B16, that's going to be the same. It's only this final group of cell references that's going to be different because we want to return a different column. This time we want to return the profit. So I'm just going to switch out these cell references for these ones just here. Let's press F4, hit enter, and we get our answer. Again, let's apply some accounting formatting. So if we take a look at Google Docs, we can see that that is in the productivity category and the profit is 1,166. Now let's take a look at some of those optional arguments when we're using XLOOKUP. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to make a quick change to this table. Now let's say that we have two occurrences of Instagram in this table. So effectively we have a duplicate lookup value. So let's select Instagram from here. You can see it's updated, so the category is game, which is correct, and the profit is 984.90. That looks correct. Let's just finish this off by adding in the revenue. So let's type in XLOOKUP. Lookup value is Instagram. Our lookup array is the apps list, and our return array this time is the revenue. Let's close the bracket and hit enter. So this looks good so far, but it's returning the details for this row just here. What if I want it to return for this one just here? Now the reason why it's returning this one is because XLOOKUP will start looking from the top to the bottom. So it's going to look down the apps column for the first occurrence of the word Instagram, and it's going to return those results. So it's always going to return the first one in the list. What if we wanted to return this one instead? Well, we can do something slightly different. Let's delete out what we've done and go back into XLOOKUP. Our lookup value is Instagram. Lookup array is still the apps list. The return array is going to be the category in this case, comma. We now move into our optional arguments. Now the first one here is we can specify what we want it to say in the cell if it can't find Instagram in the list. Now you don't necessarily have to add anything here, but you could say not found. The next argument we move on to is match mode. So again, this is if we want to do an exact match, if we want to do an exact match or next smaller item, exact match or next larger item. Those would be more relevant if you're looking up values, or we can do a wildcard character match. Now I want to do an exact match. That is the default. You don't have to put anything in here. So we'll add a 0 and move on to the last argument. Now this is where I can tell the XLOOKUP formula that I want to look from the bottom up as opposed to the top down. So the default is to search first to last, but I could say search last to first instead. And that's going to put a -1 on the end. If we close the bracket, hit enter, you can see now it returns the result that I'm looking for. So now it's looking from the bottom up, it finds Instagram and returns the correct category. So I've just gone ahead and I've modified the cell references so that these are correct. So don't forget that you have those additional arguments when you're using XLOOKUP. Now, a common question that I get at this stage is, okay, that works well, but what if I had 3, 4, 5 duplicates, 5 occurrences of Instagram in this list? How would we do that? Well, we can use an entirely different method to do that, which I'm going to show you in the next lesson. Let's just finish off this lesson by taking a quick look at XMATCH as well. So XMATCH is similar to match. So let's delete out revenue and we're going to type in equals XMATCH. Now here we've got a few arguments. Our lookup value, let's say, is Instagram. Our lookup array, well, we're looking for that in the apps list. We then get to choose our match mode. So I'm going to do an exact match, and then we can choose if we're searching first to last or last to first. So let's just do first to last, close the bracket, hit enter, and it's showing us a dollar amount. I'm going to change the formatting to general. You can see that this returns the row position again. So it's looking first to last. Instagram is the fourth item in this range. So this is very similar to using match. It just has some additional options. So that's how you can use the new XLOOKUP and XMATCH to perform flexible lookups. In the last lesson, we saw how we can use the new XLOOKUP and XMATCH functions to perform flexible lookups. And I mentioned that if you have duplicate lookup values in your table, you're going to have to think a little bit outside of the box in order to get your formula to return exactly what you want it to return. So what do I mean by all of this? Well, if you take a look at the data that we have on this worksheet, you can see that I have a little table of employee details. We have the employee's name, we have the department they work in, and they have the country that they live in. And just above, we have another small table with the employee name, the department, and we want to return the country. Now, notice that in this table, I've highlighted that we have 3 employees with exactly the same name. Now, that might seem a little bit crazy, but imagine if you're a global organization with thousands of employees, the likelihood of 2 people having the same name isn't so crazy. For example, you might have 4 John Smiths because that is a very common name. So if I want to look up the employee Olivia Moore, who's in the HR department, and return her country, I'm going to need to use some kind of lookup formula. So let's try doing this with a VLOOKUP. Our lookup value is going to be the employee name, comma. Our table array, well, we're looking it up in this table just here. I'm going to press F4 to lock that. Column index number, what column do we want to return? Well, I want to return the country, which is column number 3. And I want to do an exact match of the name. So we want a false or a 0 on the end there. Let's close the bracket and hit enter. Now it's returning UK. And if I look at this, this is completely wrong. Now, why is it returning UK? Well, the lookup value was Olivia Moore. So VLOOKUP will start at the top of the table. It will look down the column until it finds the first occurrence of Olivia Moore, which is just here. And it will return the value in the 3rd column, which is UK. Now, this Olivia Moore that we've got selected at the top here is not the same as this Olivia Moore. The one we're looking for works in the HR department, whereas it's returned the country for the Olivia Moore that works in the sales department. So we can't use VLOOKUP. What about XLOOKUP? Let's see if we have any more luck with that. Our lookup value is Olivia Moore. Our lookup array, we're looking up the employee name in the list of employees. What do we want to return? We want to return the country. Let's close the bracket, hit enter. Again, it's returning the UK because it's just looking for the first occurrence in the table of Olivia Moore. What if we double click to edit this formula and change the search mode? So I'm going to press comma a few times to jump to search mode, and I'm going to say search last to first. Let's hit enter. Now this time it's returning USA. And if I take a look at this, it's basically returning this record just here. And that's because I changed the search mode to search from last to first. So it's working from the bottom until it finds the first occurrence of Olivia Moore, and then it's returning what we have in column 3. So neither of those 2 methods are giving me exactly what I want. So how can we do this? How can we return this Olivia Moore sitting in the middle just here? Now we can use either VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP to do this, but we need to be a bit smarter about how we use them. Because what we effectively need to do is we need to create a unique reference in order to find the correct record in the table. Now, if I take a look at the information up here, I could create a unique reference by combining the employee name with the department. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a column at the beginning of my table, and I'm going to call this helper. And let's just copy the formatting across so everything's nice and consistent. And I'm going to use concatenation to create a unique reference for each record in the table. So let's type in equals. What I'm going to do is I'm going to combine the value in this cell, the employee name, ampersand, which means join. We're going to join it with the value we have in column C. What I'm now going to get, if I copy this down, is basically a unique reference for each record in the table. Because now if we look at the Olivia Moores, this one here is Olivia Moore HR, this one here is Olivia Moore Sales, and this one here is Olivia Moore Finance. So these are now unique. So what we can do in our lookup formula is reference this column as opposed to this column as our lookup value. So let's use VLOOKUP to do this. We're going to type in VLOOKUP, lookup value. Now our lookup value is going to be this cell combined with this cell. That's our lookup value. Table array. We need to include our new helper column in our table array, comma, column index number. What do we want to return? Well, we have an extra column now, so the column that we want to return is column number 4 because we want to return the country. And we're doing an exact match, so we want a false or a 0 on the end. Let's close the bracket, hit enter, check it out. We're now getting the correct result, Olivia Moore HR Germany. And if I was to change the department here to sales, it's going to return the correct result again. So by creating a way to uniquely reference each row in the table, we've managed to overcome the issue of having duplicate lookup values. And of course, if you don't want this helper column to show, there are numerous different ways you could deal with that. You could, in fact, hide the column. Alternatively, if we backspace out of there, you could simply select the cells, Control 1 to jump into formatting, go to the number tab, and in the custom group, if you type in 3 semicolons, that will effectively hide the text within those cells. Now in this case it doesn't work too well because we have formatting just here, so the most appropriate method to use would simply be to hide the column. But that is a solution to a very common problem. Remember, you can combine as many fields together as you need in order to create a unique row reference. The choose function is one of the lesser known lookup functions, but it can be useful in many different situations. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how you can use choose. So in this first example, I have a list of employees and we have their job rating. And then we have a little table over in columns G and H that converts that rating to a class. So if they scored a job rating of 1, that's considered to be poor. Job rating of 2 is fair, so on and so forth, all the way through to the top rating of 5, which is considered to be excellent. So if I want to look up what their class is based on their job rating, I could use choose. So let's click in the cell. We're going to say equals choose. Now notice the screen tip here. It says choose a value or action to perform from a list of values based on an index number. And that's a really important point. Choose needs an index number in order to work. And an index number is a value like 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can't look up text using choose. So let's press the tab key. The first argument is index number. So I want it to look up the rating. And because this is a number, that's absolutely fine to use, comma. We then need to tell the formula what we want it to return. Now we're going to copy this formula down. So the first value in the list is poor. And I'm going to press F4 to lock, comma. Value 2 is fair, F4. Value 3 is good. Value 4 is very good. And then finally, value 5 is excellent. That's all we need to do. Close the bracket, hit enter, and then we can safely double click to copy this down, and it's going to translate those ratings based on what we have in this little table over here. So a really simple way to perform a lookup. Let's take a look at how we can use choose with another function to produce a different result. So over here, again, I have a list of employees, and then we have a team column, which is currently empty. And we have this small little table over here that says team, and then we have blue, red, green, and yellow. So let's say that it is our company's summer party, and we're trying to assign people to different teams to take part in a rounders game. And those teams are blue, red, green, and yellow. Now, we want to make the assignment random so we don't have too many strong players on one team. So to randomly assign these teams to our employees, we can use a combination of choose and rand between. Now, the rand between function generates random numbers. So let's take a look at that on its own first of all before we combine it with choose. So we're going to go with rand between. We need to choose a bottom and a top number. Now, because we have 4 teams, the bottom number is going to be 1 and the top number is going to be 4. So when I close the bracket here and copy this formula down, it's going to randomly assign a number between 1 and 4 to each employee. Now, in order to get those to say blue, red, green, yellow instead of numbers, we can combine it with choose. So let's double click. Let's go to the front of the formula and add choose onto the beginning. So our index numbers are being generated by the rand between formula. So all we need to do is provide it with the corresponding values. So whenever there's a 1 in the cell, they're going to be assigned to the blue team. Whenever there's a 2, they're going to be assigned to the red team. Whenever there's a 3, they're going to be on the green team. And whenever there's a 4, they're going to be on the yellow team. Let's close off choose, hit enter, and then we can double click to copy that down. And we now have people randomly assigned to different teams. So those are a couple of use cases when it comes to using choose in order to do lookups. The switch function is very similar to the choose function and can be a good replacement for something like VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP. So in this lesson, we're going to take a look at an example of how you can use switch. Now, what we have here in column D are some movies listed out. In column E, we have a ratings column, which is currently blank. And then in column F, we have the IMDb score for that movie. And what I effectively want to do here is complete the ratings column using the IMDb score. And if we take a look over on the left-hand side, we have a little table here that shows the rating and the score that's attributed to that rating. Now, of course, this is a scenario that is kind of perfect for some kind of lookup function like VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP. And it's worth noting that the switch function, despite the fact that it is really a lookup function, you're not going to find it under the lookup and reference group of functions in the functions library. You'll actually find switch underneath logical. Now, before we get on to working with switch, let's take a look at how we would do this if we were using XLOOKUP. And then we can do a good comparison between the two. So we're going to type in XLOOKUP. Now the lookup value is going to be the IMDb score, comma. Where are we looking this up? What is our lookup array? Well, our lookup array is going to be wherever we're going to find this score. So this is our lookup array, B3 to B7. Now we're going to copy this formula down, so we don't want those cells moving, so F4 to lock. What is our return array? Well, we want to return the rating. So we need to select A3 to A7, F4 to lock, and then we close off our XLOOKUP. Let's hit enter. Let's copy this down, and we get exactly what we're looking for. Now, of course, the disadvantage with this, again, is if we were to delete this table or delete the values out, we're going to get NA errors in column E. So one advantage that the switch function and the choose function also have is that we don't necessarily have to have what we're looking up in a table or a list, because we define our values from within the formula. So let's do the same thing, but this time we're going to use switch. So Control-Shift down, just delete out everything that we have in there, and this time we're going to use switch. Our first argument is the expression. So this is basically, what are you looking up? So I want to look up the score, comma. Now I get to define the different values. So the first value I need to define is a score of 9. If it finds a score of 9, it's going to return the word excellent. If it finds a score of 8, it's going to return the words very good. 7 is going to be good. 6 is okay. And finally, 5 is poor. And close the bracket. So now if I hit enter and copy this formula down, it's going to produce exactly the same result as the XLOOKUP. The only difference here is that if this data gets deleted out of this table, it has absolutely no effect on the values in column E, because we're defining our values that we're using as opposed to referring to them via cell references in an external table or some kind of list elsewhere on the worksheet. So that is the advantage that switch, and to a lesser extent choose, have over XLOOKUP and VLOOKUP. So you might find there are certain scenarios where switch is going to be extremely useful to you, particularly if you don't want big long lists of data or tables of data on your worksheet. You just want the results. It's time now to do exercise 4. And in this exercise, we're going to practice some of the skills that we've learnt in this section of the course. Now, in this section, we were taking a look at lookup functions. And you can see here I have some data, again, that lists out athlete names, their bib number, the event that they did, in this case the full marathon, and which route they took, either east loop or west loop. And then we have the position that they finished in. So the first thing I'd like you to do is I'd like you to create a data validation drop-down list in cell H3 that lists all of the athletes. I'd then like you to use a lookup function of your choice, so you can use any lookup function, to return the bib number, the route, and the position of whatever athlete has been selected in the drop-down list. And I'd like you to add error checking into the formula to account for any NA errors that may occur. That's all I need you to do. If you'd like to see my solution to this exercise, then please download the solution file in the exercise files folder. That's it for now. I will see you in the next section.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To see the full course that this video came from, click over there. And click over there to see more videos from Simon Says It.